Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us. And thank you for taking the time to join this webinar on using Balanced Scorecard with OKRs. My name is Lana Abutayem, and I'm a project manager and a training producer working with Informa Connect. This webinar will be delivered by the Balanced Scorecard Institute CEO, David Wilsey, who is a strategic planning and performance management specialist who works with organizations to improve their strategic performance. Without further ado, David, I hand over to you. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy this webinar.
Thank you, Lana. So today we're going to talk about objectives and key results using the OKR model with Balanced Scorecard and the KPI model, using all these frameworks together. As most of you know, we provide these webinars as part of our promotional efforts related to our certification programs. We've been offering these certification programs through the George Washington University Center for Excellence in Public Leadership and with Informa Middle East for many, many years. We've been teaching Balanced Scorecard and KPI related courses for over 22 years now, I think, and certifying professionals since 2006. And now we have an OKR certification, an OKR professional certification program that we're offering directly and through our partners like Informa, as you can see on the screen. So my goal for this session is to help you all develop a basic level understanding of the differences between these frameworks. So what is a Balanced Scorecard? What are KPIs? What is the OKR model? What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of each tools, and then, how do you use them together? How do you use them with each other to take advantage of the strengths of each tool, avoid the weaknesses of each tool, to create alignment, to improve your strategic focus, improve your performance, create a culture of accountability, and so forth. All right, so there's a lot of confusion about these frameworks. We sometimes have clients, and I've heard other consultants say this, where you have clients that tell you that they secretly think that these are just the same thing, and you consultants are just trying to make up something so you can sell something new. And frankly, it is a little frustrating that there are different frameworks out there that are designed to do the same thing. They Balanced Scorecard, OKRs, KPIs, they're all designed to help organizations with goal setting, with creating alignment, measuring progress, improving performance, improving a culture of accountability. They're all sort of aimed at the same thing, and because the acronyms are similar, it can be very confusing for folks. I always like to compare it to the difference between a stove and a grill and a microwave. They're tools that are designed to do roughly the same thing. Each tool has strengths and weaknesses, but if you're good at this, you know what you're doing. You can take advantage of the different tools to get the most out of whatever you're trying to do. So in a big picture sense, what are you trying to do? You're trying to use this framework to manage strategic performance. Okay, we're talking about leaders and employees answering basic questions like, what is our mission and vision? What is our picture of future success? What are we trying to accomplish? And then what is our plan for creating those outcomes? We create shared outcomes, and we design a plan to make that happen. And then how do we align all of our operating goals with that plan? How do we make sure that no matter what level of the organization, we're all aiming for the same thing? And then how do we get stuff done? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to do something. You can't just create a poster and put it on the wall. So strategy management is all about connecting the dots between these various elements, making sure that when you go in to work every day, all of our employees are focusing on things that are aligning with our strategy, so that we can make things better. That's what we're aiming for. How can we coordinate all these various pieces? So Balanced Scorecard and KPIs are great at that high level, big picture stuff. How do I make sure I communicate? Balanced Scorecards are all about communicating strategy, so we can all align around it. Now, this is a picture from a city. This is a balanced scorecard for a city, but the basic picture, the pieces of the system would look the same regardless of what kind of organization it is. So you're communicating high level strategy, mission, vision. Maybe you have 3 or 4 focus areas. You might call them themes, or you might call them goals, and then you've got a what we call a strategy map. This picture on the left side of the screen here that shows what our objectives are and what is the cause and effect relationship between those objectives across different perspectives, so I can see how the things that we are working on internally are driving the outcomes that we ultimately want to achieve. Okay, so that's the part where I'm communicating the scorecard. In the middle part of the scorecard system, you see our KPIs. The KPIs let us know whether we're making progress towards achieving our objectives, okay, at the organization level. So I'm trending these performance measures over time, and I'm trying to hit a particular target. Okay, so that middle part of the balanced scorecard includes KPIs, and then on the right side of the screen, you've got initiatives. And initiatives are the actions that you're taking that are designed to make a difference, help us hit our targets, help us achieve our objectives. So I prioritize those initiatives down to a short list, and we implement those to make things better. So that's how a balanced scorecard, along with our KPIs, can be used at the organization level to improve performance. Now, for those that work in the agile software development world, there's one glaring weakness to the balanced scorecard approach, and that's the way the balanced scorecard professionals prefer to cascade the system throughout the organization in an effort to create alignment. So in general terms, this is how that process works. So you've got first, you make some strategic assumptions, and based on those assumptions, you create a strategy. You define your mission, your vision, your goals, and so forth. And then all of that gets translated into organization level objectives and KPIs, the picture I just showed you on the last slide. So from there, usually there's this process that we go through where we cascade that strategy down into departments and business units, support units. And so everybody, all of these teams are creating objectives that align with the objectives at the organization level. This usually takes months. Then you turn around and you do the same thing at the individual level. So all the individual employees throughout the organization have personal objectives that are aligned with their department and or their organization. This can take quite some time. So with the agile folks, they look at this process and they ask themselves, well, what would happen if your strategic assumptions turn out to be wrong? Then what happens? So you've gone through all this work. You've spent maybe a year to, maybe longer than that, developing all these pieces. And then you're in the software business, and suddenly your competitors are doing something different, and you have to pivot into a completely different direction. This can be a cumbersome process to suddenly shift. Okay, so if you're in the software world, they tend to not use a system like this. They tend to use a framework called OKR. The OKR model is a popular goal setting framework. Again, if you read this description, it sounds very much like the others, right? It's about setting goals, tracking progress, aligning action with strategy, and frankly, it's not new. It sort of feels like it's new because Google is doing it now, and it's becoming more popular. It actually goes all the way back to the management by objectives framework. So this has been around since the 50s. It evolved a little bit in the 80s. Many of you probably are familiar with SMART goals, the concept of creating our SMART objectives. The SMART model is just an evolution of management by objectives, and OKRs is just the next iteration, created by Andy Grove and John Doerr at Intel, and then later at Google. It's become very, very popular in the technology world for sure. Whoops, I don't know what it's doing. All right, so like I said, here's a few logos. If you go online, you can find hundreds and hundreds of organizations that are using this framework. Just some of the logos that I found, you'll notice that most of these are technology companies because they tend to work in the field where it's valuable to be able to pivot quickly. Okay, and frankly, because Google used it, and everybody likes to do whatever Google does. So it's a very popular framework. it started to be used more and more in the non-tech world. We've seen governments using it. Some of these logos, the Gap, GE, Walmart, I think, is now using it. It is a framework that is being used in organizations beyond just the technology world. And I'll show you some of the reasons why I think it's a very simple model. In the OKR model, you have objectives, which qualitatively describe what you're trying to accomplish, and then you have key results that quantifiably capture or measure what you will accomplish. Okay, so the objectives are very abstract. They're high level. They're lofty. They're supposed to be ambitious. So I might have an objective like improve the customer experience. Okay, that's sort of an abstraction. I have to have a key result, which is measurable, that tells me whether we're actually doing that. So maybe I'm using Net Promoter Score and I'm targeting a 5% increase by the end of the quarter. That's my key result. Okay, and then I might have another one. Our objective is to increase healthcare market share. Okay, that's our objective. The way we're going to know that we're making progress is we're looking for a 10% increase in healthcare vertical sales by the end of the quarter. Okay, so there's the objective. The key result is measurable, and everybody creates those. Okay, from the CEO down. The CEO has their objective is related to profits, and they've got measurements. The chief operating officer is focusing on quality. The VP of customer service is focusing on the customer experience. The VP of human capital is focusing on knowledge and skills. And you'll notice each of these folks have key results that they're aiming for. They're measurable. They're timely. In other words, they want to hit these numbers by the end of the quarter, and on a regular basis, they get together and they talk about the progress they're making towards achieving their OKRs. Okay. You can also share these by team. Okay, so the finance team has an objective. They share that as a team. The product management team has an objective. They have some key results that they're trying to achieve. The marketing team has, it looks like, two objectives and several key results. So you can have shared OKRs. But the one thing that's different, I think, than KPIs, you tend to trend over time, right? I might create a line graph and I trend it over time and I'm looking at improved performance. OKRs tend to be reported more like this, where you say, did I achieve it or not? And on a scale of 0 to 1, can I score each of these OKRs based on whether or not I achieved what I said I was going to achieve? So 1 meaning I got it right, and it looks like some of these are scored 0.5, meaning I'm partially done. 0 means I didn't make any progress. So the reporting is simpler. It's not nearly as sophisticated as you might see on a KPI dashboard, but because it's simpler, your employees can manage this. There's no one right, there's not one author, single authority on OKR development, on the process methodology, but there are certain conventions that are starting to emerge. One is that you can think of your OKRs as committed or aspirational. And so if this is a committed OKR, then what you're suggesting is I'm going to achieve 100% of all those committed ones. Those are the ones that I'm saying we're going to do. And aspirational OKRs are thought of as more stretch targets. And so you're not going to achieve 100% of those. Maybe 60 to 70% of those, is adequate. It's indicating that you're really stretching. You're really trying to make a difference. You're reaching maybe a little bit beyond what you probably could, in some cases, achieve. Other convention is that OKRs are shared transparently. This is quite a culture shock for some folks, that the OKRs for the CEO are just as transparently shared as the OKRs for your janitors or the employees on the shop floor. Everybody can, before you meet with somebody, you can find out what their OKRs are and see how they're doing. And report it on a regular cadence. You don't want to set these and just forget about them over time. Like I've already said, we don't cascade top down in the OKR world. They are thought to align bidirectionally over time, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the idea is that you can reset these every quarter, or maybe your cadence is a little faster than that, or maybe it's a little slower than that. The point is, on a regular basis, you can revisit your strategy and say, is there anything different about our world? Are our experiments working, or are they not working? Can we try something new and change our strategy? The point being that we are building strategic agility into our framework, right? And by agility, what I mean is the ability to detect and quickly adapt to changes. In other words, how quickly did we all adapt to the pandemic? How quickly did we adapt to everybody working from home? Can we change our strategy on the fly and start measuring new things that tell us whether we're going to be successful in this new environment or not? The reason why OKRs help be adapt quicker is because they have this shorter cycle. Instead of thinking about years down the road, you might be thinking about quarters, maybe even less. There might be some organizations that report on these on a monthly basis. The emphasis is on action and getting things done. It's not nearly as much emphasis on creating this alignment structure. And frankly, that's one of the weaknesses, is that there's not as much emphasis on the discipline of creating, the OKRs that are consistent top down. So individuals can create their OKRs without having to wait for that formal cascading exercise to get around to them. They can just be creating them on the fly. Frankly, you can create these in your teams, in a way that improves collaboration, improves shared responsibility. Every time you sit down with a team, you can say, okay, how are we going to know whether we're successful or not? What is our OKR? And you can create them on the fly. Now, the formal methodology, would mean that you would be doing this on a quarterly basis, but there's not any reason why you can't create them as needed. So in the end, you're creating clear communication through this transparency. I think the thinking behind this is captured very well by this quote from Jeff Bezos. If you're good at course correcting, being wrong is less costly than you think, whereas being slow is going to be expensive for sure. Okay, so someone who's in, the Amazon.com space really does need to be able to react, fast. In a huge organization like that, needs all the help they can get to make changes on the fly. All right, so if you were to listen to any of the thought leaders in this space, you're going to hear a lot of these kinds of stories, how you're shifting your planning culture. This is Felipe Castro, but there's just about any of the folks in this space will be talking about how we're going to stop thinking about top-down culture. We're going to stop thinking about the bosses being the only ones that have good ideas, and we're going to shift to having aligned autonomy around desired outcomes. Google takes great pride in the fact that some of their best ideas come from the engineer who wrote that something into one of their programs, came up with an idea, and it turned out to be a new product. That's what you're aiming for. So as long as you have some desired outcomes articulated, people can align around that. So we're shifting away from a long-term static planning towards an iterative hypothesis validation. In other words, we're going to experiment. We're going to allow people to create a hypothesis, experiment, and see whether it works or not in a much shorter time period than planning out for 5 years and seeing how it turns out over 5 years. So this long planning cycle goes away, and you're literally trying to encourage people to experiment and find out, use the principles of performance management on a shorter term basis to find out whether you're making a difference or not. Now, those are all the good things. So if that's all the good things, what are some of the weaknesses that come with OKRs? I always say that OKRs won't replace your balanced scorecard, but what I really mean is that there are some serious challenges with the way that a lot of organizations are implementing them. First of all, if anytime you ask all employees to do something, anything that requires a certain amount of skill in strategic or analytical thinking that's outside of their realm of expertise, you run into the risk that you're going to create a mess. As evidence that as you can look at how strongly most employee evaluation systems work. Many employees just they don't know where to start when it comes to goal setting and articulating a desired outcome. They really wrestle with that. Um, in the balanced scorecard and KPI world, you have a champion. And so the champion facilitates the input from everyone, but then they can refine the results into a coherent system. But my experience with OKRs is that even talented employees um, can struggle with each step in the process. I've talked to PhD computer scientists, programmers who can't seem to differentiate between a qualitative and a quantitative result. So the results can be it can be chaotic. I have OKR clients who call and say they have no shared vision, no strategy. They just set everybody loose, to create their OKRs. And so the result is they've got long to-do lists that are posed as OKRs. They've got long laundry lists of measures. They've got misalignment. You have one team going this direction, another team going this direction. Um, we have supervisors that don't follow up. We have clients that they have OKRs, but no high-level strategy. So inevitably, if they do that, employees want to be able to align to something. They really want this cause and effect story, this picture on the right. They want to be able to. If you just say go create objectives, you get a deer in the headlights look by your employees. But if you say, look, employees, here's our organizational set level objectives. What objectives can you create to align with these objectives? Then the conversation is completely different. Now they're saying, we're trying to lower cycle time so that I can lower wait time. What objectives can I create to align with that objective? It's a very different conversation than just setting them free to create whatever they want. So that guidance, that something to align around is quite valuable. All right, so earlier I made the point that this is about comparing a stove versus a grill versus a microwave. Some of the tools have different strengths and weaknesses. So let's just review a little bit. Balanced scorecard to me is ideal for communicating strategy, for visualizing cause effect, creating alignment. So those that high level strategy really is better formatted in a balanced scorecard format. KPIs are great for trending long-term performance, trending and improving performance on a continuous basis. Anything I'm going to trend with a line graph, that's not going to go away. I'm not going to stop measuring revenue. I'm going to keep increasing revenue, reducing costs. There are things in every department that I'm going to trend over time. And I think that using a KPI dashboard is more useful than just knowing yes or no, did my employees achieve something? So KPIs still have a place in our framework. But what OKRs are really strong for is helping my employees set goals and get things done. I have seen many scorecard and KPI systems get set, and then people lose interest over time and don't get anything done over time. And OKRs really are great for making sure that we have a regular cadence. Every quarter we get together, we talk about, did we get something done? And can I encourage my employees to think in terms of performance management principles in their day-to-day life? I've seen other authors talk about how a balanced scorecard doesn't fit into the rhythm of our day-to-day life, and that's what OKRs do really well. Every quarter, you have things that you need to get done, and so I can design my own OKRs around my day-to-day routine. I can use the same principles, and I can use this framework to help make sure that I'm communicating with others. And in terms of the cascading, what are the benefits there? Well, the cascading can be a benefit in terms of emphasizing alignment, line of sight, making sure that we're tracking things on a continuous basis and that there's some connection between those various pieces. Um, it is designed a little bit more around continuous improvement as opposed to just getting something done on a cyclical basis. Um, Hitting a milestone on the OKR side, it can be great, but sometimes you hit a milestone and then you move away from it. The KPI side encourages that continuous focus. On the other hand, the OKRs are really good about setting goals each quarter. It's designed to create agility and it's designed to create autonomy. In other words, I want my employees to set their own goals and take accountability for their actions, take accountability for creating the outcomes that we all want to achieve. So you can use these frameworks together. There's not any reason why you can't use a balanced scorecard at the organization level to set and track objectives and KPIs, anything that tends to change slowly. Like I said, the increased revenue example, increased customer satisfaction. There are going to be objectives at the organization level that you can track with your balanced scorecard and with your KPIs. And then cascading scorecards can be useful for the units that are strategically autonomous. In other words, like we're working with a university IT department, large IT department that functions almost as an independent organization. They need to do their own formal planning. They find it useful to be able to map out their strategy, to map out their objectives, and communicate what they are trying to achieve. So an autonomous unit like that can benefit from the planning side of Balanced Scorecard. Um, but then from there, you can just have everyone create their OKRs to provide focus on short-term accountability. So these are the measurements that tend to be goal focused. I want to increase sales in the European market by 10% by the end of this quarter. That's the kind of short-term, timely outcome that I want to achieve. I want to make sure that we're focused on that this quarter. And so I create an OKR. It's not necessarily something I'm going to track forever. But it's something I'm going to be focusing on now to know whether we can move into the European market. So I can create OKRs at the shared level. That might be one of my marketing team's shared OKRs, or that could be an individual level OKR. And so you can use these frameworks just like this. I've got this shared OKR that's aligned with the organization. I've got this personal OKR. It's designed with, focused on my department. Now, there are pros and cons, of course, to using multiple frameworks. Now, um, the benefits are that you can take advantage of the strengths of each tool. As they do complement each other fairly well. They rely on the same skills. They're aimed at the same basic outcomes. Using the frameworks together can benefit from dividing responsibilities. In other words, you can have different people handle it. That the HR team might be handling the OKR side, and the strategy team might be handling the balanced scorecard and the KPI side. So that can help make this thing work like that. On the con side, obviously there's different, using different frameworks can add some complexity. And it adds to the confusion. I've had several balanced scorecard clients tell me that they didn't think that their culture could handle another set of terms, another set of steps. In those cases, it's simply easier to learn from the weaknesses of each framework and to use one or the other and just modify as you need. Like you can, as the slide says, you could implement balanced scorecard, and then at the tier 3 level, at the individual level, you just adopt the performance cadence and the commitment style of OKRs, so that everybody is talking about their objectives and their KPIs and their actions or projects that they're implementing at the individual level. So you adopt the same principles, but you just call them objectives and KPIs so that we don't have to learn new terms. And then a lot of OKR organizations are creating shared, long-term shared OKRs at the strategic goal level. So they have OKRs throughout the system. They make sure that they create what looks like a balanced scorecard almost at the organization level. They just create OKRs around that strategic level. All right. So if you want to know more about this, we do have like I said earlier in the process, we have a certification program that we've developed. That we will start this summer with this program. You can go to balancedscorecard.org/OKR to learn about that program. The course, like I said, will start in June, and based on the Informa model, or with Informa, in July we will be offering it here in the U.S. All these programs are online, of course. And then if you're an OKR user and you want to know more about Balanced Scorecard, you can obviously see our Balanced Scorecard Professional Certification Program by going to balancedscorecard.org/BSP. And then if you want to see me talk about this a little bit longer, I will be delivering a master class using Balanced Scorecard with OKRs to align and adapt. This is for the Association for Strategic Planning's annual conference. The conference is May 19th through the 21st. The theme of the conference is Mastering the Strategy Lifecycle. You can learn more about it there at strategyassociation.org. My master class will be on May 19th. I think it's a 3-hour master class, so you'll actually get your hands dirty, and it'll be more like a training program to learn how to develop OKRs and use that with your Balanced Scorecard. All right. I think that is all I've got. Do you want to open the floor for questions?
Yes, thank you so much, David, for the presentation. The Q&A is open at this moment. So
Okay.
there are a number of questions that came in. Just give me a minute to give you the first question. But the first one I would like to address is that a number of people asked if they will be receiving the PowerPoint presentations and the webinar after this session. The answer is yes, we will be sending it as soon as the webinar is done. So just give it a few hours until you receive that email. Okay, shooting off the first question. The question is, hi, how can Lean Six Sigma add value with Balanced Scorecard, KPIs, and OKRs when it comes to improvement?
Lean Six Sigma is, when I help organizations with their Balanced Scorecard, define their strategy, inevitably there is an objective called improve processes, key processes, something along those lines. And so Lean Six Sigma tends to be the Lean Six Sigma department tends to be a very strong player in this process to make sure that we're making things better. Usually, in other words, all of the initiatives related to the Lean Six Sigma effort are designed to create outcomes that are captured in our Balanced Scorecard. I mean, the Lean Six Sigma folks that I work with almost all want to know, what are we trying to accomplish with this? It's not just to reduce waste to the point of no benefit. We want to make sure that we're reducing waste or making things more efficient so that we can achieve certain outcomes. And so you want to connect the dots between those efforts and the outcomes that we've defined in our Balanced Scorecard system.
Okay, thank you, David. So we have two questions pertaining to the use of Balanced Scorecard in education. So it reads as follow. Can Balanced Scorecard be used in kindergarten to 12, to grade 12, to determine how successful education equity efforts are? If yes, can you give me references to the schools which we are using? That is the first question. The second one is which system would you recommend for schools from grade kindergarten to 12, and why?
Great question. You can use a Balanced Scorecard in any environment. or KPIs or OKRs. The point is any organization can benefit from saying, what are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure our progress towards that? So we've worked with a lot of schools over the years. Now, the first part of the question, can it be useful for K through 12 schools? And the answer is definitely yes. Now, you specifically said something about successful education equity efforts. So the key there is to make sure that you've defined your objectives properly. In other words, you want to make sure that your objectives and measures are designed around equity. Can you define what that means? Can you articulate an intended result that clarifies what equity looks like? And in which case, it should be very useful to have measurements on your dashboard that are communicating whether or not you're successful in your equity efforts. Now, in terms of references, in terms of using schools using measurements related to equity efforts, I'd have to go look at our list to see. But I'll look and see if any of our schools are using that. It's very popular in the higher education world. We work with a lot of medical universities, a lot of a lot of colleges are using this. The example I gave earlier, an IT department for a university, yeah, using KPIs. It's very, very, very popular.
Thank you, David. Okay, so the next question. We are currently using a balanced scorecard based OKR system for performance management and using a cascading system. This is our second year. How do you think we will benefit if we continue, or should we change the approach?
So they're using a balanced scorecard, they've cascaded it, and they're doing OKRs. As long as it's not confusing for folks, it sounds to me like they're doing fine. I would have to know more. I'd want to talk to the person to know what's working and what's not working. My only hesitation about using all of that at the same time is the complexity of it. One of the things that can really bog down the system is making this too complicated for people and allowing it to become an overwhelming amount of work for people. So as long as the system is simple and focused at the organization level and simple and focused at the individual level, all of those pieces working together, should be fantastic.
Okay, excellent. There are a lot of questions coming in, so I'm just
Yes.
skipping through them as we speak. Okay, so one came in saying, we are in a process of establishing a new performance management system. One of the key outcomes we expect is to have a fair variable compensation structure for our employees. What kind of approach would you advise us?
The horror stories that I've heard about trying to use performance measurement for compensation systems, it makes me wary of that topic, just generally speaking. I know some people make it work. In other words, we hit our goals, and so therefore I'm going to pay my employees differently. Some people seem to make it work, but I have had a lot of people tell me that can be a real problem. It changes the nature of the system. In other words, the way people approach it. If I know my pay is based on whether or not I hit a goal or a target, then I'm going to design the system differently. It's very, very hard to avoid that for people to just be objective and implement it fairly. And so I would be really cautious. Make sure that you get everything else perfect. You're using the system to articulate what you're trying to accomplish. You're using the system to encourage people to share bad news. We didn't hit our target here, and so therefore I want to share that. And so we all have a discussion around why we didn't hit it, and do we need to move resources around. Shared vision, make sure that we're all on the same page, that there's some consensus around what success looks like. Make sure you nail all of those things first, and then maybe experiment with the pay compensation model. Don't start there for sure. The horror stories. I had one client that I showed up to give a presentation on Balanced Scorecard, and it was to the entire company, and 2 minutes into the presentation, a hand went up, and they wanted to ask about compensation. How do you tie it to compensation? I thought, well, that's a That's a very advanced question for the 2 minutes into the presentation. And then I got 10 minutes along and another hand went up. They wanted another question about compensation. It turned out that the company had implemented Balanced Scorecard a year earlier, and they had tied it to compensation, and they had a bonus program that they drained for another purpose. And everybody knew it all year long. They knew they weren't going to get a bonus. And so they brought me in to try to defend this system that they had created. It was hostile. It was a tough crowd. So be careful. That's all I would say.
Okay, so we'll take two more questions, I think,
Okay.
as we're nearing the end of the webinar. Okay, so this is a lengthy one, so bear with me. Thank you for the presentation. At one slide, you mentioned that we can self-evaluate each OKR with a score from 0 to 10. Shouldn't this be exclusively and objectively tied to the KR metric itself? Aren't we introducing subjectivity in a framework that should support the objective reflection of the company performance? Thank you for answering the question in advance. That was the question.
Yes, that is such a good question. It's by the scale is 0 to 1, so it's a decimal point. But yes, you're introducing subjectivity to the process. And my KPI background makes me want to say, yes, of course we should definitely be using a set target and be much more precise about it. But when you're implementing something organization wide and you've got 300 employees and you're asking 300 employees to create OKRs, having a simpler system that does allow for a little bit of subjectivity can make it a little easier to implement. That's been my observation anyway. Um, it's of course you would like for the numeric side to be very, very clear cut. I've said that we're going to hit 10%, a 10% increase in our European market. That means that if we're at 9%, we didn't hit our number, and so I don't get to put my score at 1. I have to have some sort of a scale to create a score. But you can't expect 300 employees to all be perfectly precise in their analysis of their OKRs. What you do want to encourage is to have 300 employees thinking strategically and thinking about what they can and cannot accomplish, and getting people to create this themselves is a massive success. Can I get all of my employees to create their own goals? They look bad. They're not the kind of goals I would create. They might not be perfect. They're not perfectly objective, but just getting people to think strategically and getting them to articulate what they're going to accomplish is quite an accomplishment in and of itself.
Thank you, David. So the last question goes as follows. Would it be advice for an organization to participate in the certification program if they're thinking about moving to a balanced scorecard? Methodology,
Uh,
I'm assuming, some
I'm sorry.
similar.
Can you say that again? I misunderstood, I think.
Would it
Can you
be advice for an organization to participate in the certification program if they're thinking about moving to balanced scorecard? So maybe it's just a question between balanced scorecard and
Mhm.
OKRs.
Right. No, in other words, I think so. The question I think is, would the organization should they be going towards the OKR certification if they use Balanced Scorecard? I think what I would, um, I mean, obviously we would love for everybody to take all of our certification programs. The certification programs are designed to help practitioners get better at this. At the Balanced Scorecard level, that it's designed to help the champion who's going to be facilitating this process. We have a KPI certification that's designed for anybody that's going to be managing KPIs to really know this stuff inside and out. The OKR program is designed for people who are going to be champions of the OKR process. They're going to be coaching people to make sure that they're creating OKRs that are as consistent and aligned as possible, that they can, you really do have to help each employee. So supervisors are going to need help making sure that they can follow up with their employees, and that the scoring is done in a consistent manner and things like that. So there's a lot of work. So back to the question, if you're a Balanced Scorecard company, if should you implement to take the program and go down the OKR route? I think again, I would talk to one of the instructors maybe to see if you think it's going to be a good fit. How comfortable is your organization with all of the terminology on the balanced scorecard level? How comfortable are you with adding another layer of complexity of having an OKR system? Would you maybe, like on the slide that I was talking about, the alternative method is to simply have individual level KPIs and objectives and implement them like OKRs. Implement them in a way that you talk about it every quarter. Every quarter you reset your KPIs at the individual level. Every quarter you reset your objectives if needed. Every quarter you allow people to adapt to whatever the strategic environment is. That can work without going down the OKR route. It still might be good. It might be useful to learn about OKRs. What are the benefits, and why is it that people think that that's strong? So there are certain benefits to at least learning about the pros and cons. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for everyone who joined this webinar. I understand there are still a lot of questions, which I hope our sales managers would be able to answer once you get in touch with us for any questions about the certification programs and so forth. And also our subject matter experts would be able to elaborate further on any other technical matters. As I've mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, this session is recorded and will be sent to you after the completion of this session. Any final notes from your end, David, before we
I would just echo the
end this
same
one?
thing. If we didn't get to your question, there's always, when we say, questions, so it's always like 500 questions that come rolling in. So we don't get to everybody's questions. If we didn't get to your question, just reach out to Informa or to me directly, and we'll be happy to try to address your questions.
Yes, of course. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time, and have a lovely day, whatever you are. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.